So this video, I've got everything pretty much drawn accurately in terms of the face and the hair and the number 2. So now I'm just going to look for the areas where I've got thicker and thinner outlines, and I'm just going to get them as accurate as I can. So for instance, over here, I've made sure that I've done the outside edge of everything. So I'm going to be adding the thickness on the inside edge. So what you want to do is make sure that you pick a way to be consistent there. So right here, I'm just looking for where the different parts are the thickest and the thinnest. And I know it's thicker up here, thinner here, and then gets thicker again here. So what I'm doing is just putting those thicknesses and thinness in where they need to be. The same thing is true over here. I notice that the inside of this outline is right on this vertical line. So I'm going to make sure that I use that. And again, it's thicker at the top, thinner at the bottom. And then this cheek actually sort of comes to a point here and is pretty thick going all the way down in terms of the outline, and overlaps into this square a little bit. So I'm going to make sure the mine does the same thing. Notice that I am still drawing lightly because I still may have things to correct as I'm going along. And then the ear has this sort of curve on the inside. So I'm going to draw that line, looking more at my reference image than I am at my paper, which is something that you are going to have to get used to because it does not feel natural. But anytime you are drawing from a reference image, you're going to want to make sure that you look more at your reference image than at your own paper. Sounds weird, feels weird, but it turns out best. So again, the ear is thinnest here, thicker on the outside. And then this ear is pretty much a little thicker here, but not much. And then at the bottom, it's just kind of parallel here. And then there is a line that shows the inside of the ear here. Kind of like a crescent moon shape almost. So I'm going to go ahead and get that in there. And then I'm going to go ahead and pay attention to the thickness of the different parts of the sort of cloudy space that is the hair. And one thing I'm really going to want to pay attention to here is where they overlap and where one part of the hair comes to a point separate from another part of the hair. So like for instance here, this part comes up to a point and then this next one starts. Here, they both come to the same point, and that is the thinnest part of both. And then once I get here, this one comes up separate. Is thickest on the bottom, thinnest toward the top, and then actually overlaps to come to a point on this side as well. And then this one is thinnest on the right-hand side, and then comes to a point with this next one, which is thickest on the bottom, comes to a point with the other one, and this one is thickest sort of right here. And then comes to a point with this one. So all I'm doing, once again, is just paying attention to where the outline is thicker versus thinner and making sure the mine matches as best I can. It is a step that does take a little bit of time, and it can be a bit of a pain, but it will turn out much more accurately in terms of your final image, because once again, our goal is to make sure that our candy wrapper is quite obvious and recognizable. And this one comes to a point on this side. It gets pretty thick on that side. So it's thin over here, but then quite thick on the other side. So then this one comes to a point here and gets really thin right here, but then does thicken up a little bit here. And then this line is very thick. So that might be the thickness on the sort of cloudy hair shape and the thickness on the face. And then on the two, because it's not just a thickness, it's kind of a splatter. The first thing that I'm going to do is go ahead and start here with adding sort of that rectangle that is the white area. Now, because this is such a small area, if you have something like that on yours that is itty bitty tiny, you can leave it out, because we would still be able to tell which candy this is without that little white rectangle there. And then I'm basically just starting similarly to how I began the other one. I'm just doing sort of an outline of that splatter that goes around the two. Not getting full detail yet, but just mostly putting where the splatter needs to be. And then I'll pay attention to where the actual splatter effect is. So like here, because it's a bigger area, I am going to go ahead and do the outline of the splatter. And again, it's not 100% perfect, but it is close enough that I can tell what it is, and that's what I'm going for more. So then this part just needs to be thicker. This whole splatter area needs to move up a little bit. So right now I'm just going directly into that next step, sort of double checking my outline like I did on the first part. Making things more accurate as I go along, adding more detail, and starting to get a little bit of that splatter in there. Still paying attention to where things are in relation to other parts of itself. So like I know that this comes out to a point sort of right here above this, but below this. And then that bit of the splatter comes pretty much all the way to this line and then comes back into itself. Includes this rectangle area here. Where again, I would recommend using a ruler, especially once you're on the latter steps. Right now, because I'm still on the sort of very beginning outlining steps, I'm not going to worry as much about a ruler. But then the further along I get with my detail and accuracy, I'm going to add the ruler in. So here I'm just adding some bits of the splatter. Because now I've got sort of my outline of the face and the hair, a general drawing of the splatter section. So now my next step is going to be to add the face on the inside portion here using my grid, and then I'll start into the lettering up here, and then I'll do the same sort of 2 to 3 step process on both of those parts. And then what I'll do is erase my grid lines and just eyeball everything, make sure it all makes sense before I start in with any outlining. And then color would be the last step once I'm completely finished with everything else.